again, everybody, and welcome to Tiger Sidelines on Zoom alongside Dave Matter and Gabe DeArmond. I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks for joining us as always, and we'll start with the football team. We'll talk basketball a little bit later on, a couple of nice wins for the basketball team. But football with a humongous win. It looked really dicey in the second half. In the fourth quarter, they're down to Arkansas. But nevertheless, Dave, they come back and they pull this one out somehow 50-48.
Wild game. So there were so many storylines going into it. And then when you walk away from it, there were so many storylines that happened in the game. I mean, I just remember writing about it. I didn't even touch on things that happened in the first half because there's so much happened. It felt like one of those like triple overtime games because so much happened at the end and things did not go Missouri's way. They're down 14. I think everybody in that stadium probably, except for the guys on the sideline, probably gave up on Missouri's chances, even though they're only down 2 scores. It's not like, they were down 28. And sure enough, they come back and showed this resiliency that we're starting to become a trend under Eli Drinkwitz. Very similar to the LSU game. Same end zone, things happen, not so good for Missouri this time. And then they finished it off. Really impressive.
That almost, Gabe, went down as another game in Missouri lore where the 2-point conversion beats them, but thankfully that didn't happen. But to Dave's point, there was so much that happened, especially in the last couple of minutes, but it was the largest fourth quarter comeback for Missouri. And it was quite impressive because usually when they're down 14 points, you're like, all right, this one's over, pack it up.
Well, and the reason I was ready to pack it up at 40-26 is there was no reason to think the defense was suddenly going to get a stop. I mean, they had barely stopped Arkansas all day long. They got a 3-and-out on the first series, and then KJ Jefferson figured out, oh, hey, I can do this. And they scored pretty much every time they touched the ball. But then I think it was 4 out of the last 6 Arkansas drives. Missouri forced no points, So and again, it's kind of like the LSU game. It doesn't completely redeem everything they did for the first 3 quarters because that was not a good defensive day. But on the flip side, when they reached the point where it was, there's no more, you give up one more score, this game's over. They didn't give up one more score until they did, but then they gave it up quickly enough that Missouri had time to go back down the field.
And we can debate about the hit, but they did it without their leader. I mean, they played really 2.5 quarters without Nick Bolton. Again, we can debate whether it was targeting or not. The bottom line is they threw the flag and then they upheld the call on the field. They did it without Bolton. And I like the fact that he was on the sideline. I like the fact that they've changed that rule and allowed him to be a leader and almost a coach on the sideline.
You know what I like? That Ryan Walters told the truth, which was, we weren't any good with him on the field either.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying that losing Nick Bolton doesn't matter in that game, but there was literally nothing you could do to make that Missouri defense worse than it was for 2.5 quarters, And actually, I thought the best thing for Missouri is when it happened. If that happens literally on Arkansas's next drive, they're without him for the first half against Georgia. So, yeah, I thought it was a bad call. Eli Drinkwitz thought it was a good call, and then somehow miraculously 2 days later realized it was not a good call. But, it is what it is at this point. They're always happy to have something like that to talk about after they won a game.
Dave, do you think it was defensive familiarity that there were so many points scored?
It just seemed like the tempo really bothered Missouri. They couldn't get lined up. I mean, they kept having to look over the sideline constantly whenever Arkansas would look over to their sideline, and the ball was getting snapped before guys were down all the way. I do think maybe Missouri got more stops defensively when Bolton was out of the game than they did with him. But I wonder too, if some of that is, he's the guy that sets the defense and tells them where to line up and all that. I wonder if that added a little confusion without him out there. He also he didn't appear to be 100%. I mean, he was not running full speed. He got his ankle taped at one point, jogged back out there. But they looked a step slow all the time. And there were times where Arkansas threw the ball. I'm thinking, why are they bothering doing this? They're getting 6-7 yards every time. They just ran it up the middle against this suddenly deeper defensive line from Missouri that now looked like they were just getting run over. And I think it was tempo more than just like brute force. They just weren't in the right place, or they just weren't there quick enough, it seemed like.
But they got the stops when they needed. And then offensively, Gabe, we haven't even talked about Harrison Mevis, who we'll get to in a minute. But when they needed points, Connor Bazelak and the offense really came through. I mean, even in the final 40 seconds, But forget about that. When they're down 14, they didn't quit and put points on the board.
Yeah, just getting them to that point. I mean, Larry Roundtree was phenomenal again. I think I saw he was like one of 5 guys in school history now with back-to-back or 3 straight 150-yard games. Tyler Beatty he is non-existent for 3 quarters in that game. His first touch is a 46-yard touchdown. Then he has a 25-yard touchdown that a lot of people like. I saw somebody on Twitter saying it's actually right. It was the Reggie Bush run, except he didn't pass the ball around his back, when he cut back off the sideline. I mean, Beatty is electric. And then, yeah, they get the ball back with 43 seconds left. And, I thought when Arkansas scored, I actually thought that's the best thing that could happen to Missouri is they score now. Because if Arkansas scores 2 plays later, that game's over. We can also talk about how Missouri's former head coach is now the defensive coordinator and somehow allowed Missouri to complete 2 passes that got out of bounds. And Missouri didn't even have to use all its timeouts and had time to run the ball. I mean, that's partly what football is now. 43 seconds. It used to be you got the ball with 43 seconds left. You were hoping to get to midfield and throw a Hail Mary. 43 seconds now, we see, and I mean, it's not just Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers that do it. There are offenses that go the length of the field in that amount of time fairly regularly.
Especially when you need a field goal. Right. It's not like they needed 6. They just needed to get into range. And that seems, to your point, Gabe, that seems to be getting easier and easier.
Yeah, and it really does. I wrote a lot this week on Monday. Coaches are slower to change than anybody. And coaches simply will not adjust to, yes, I need to score, but I also need to be conscious of when I score because otherwise I'm hurting my chances to win the game. I mean, again, if Arkansas, I know you can't tell a guy to go down at the 2-yard line in that situation, but Arkansas would have been better off if the guy goes down at the 2-yard line. I mean, that's how football is these days. Every rule is set up to help the offense. Passing games are almost impossible to stop. And in college, when you stop the clock on a first down, I mean, 43 seconds and 3 timeouts, you don't want to say the clock isn't a factor, but with a good quarterback, the clock almost isn't a factor.
Yeah, no doubt. And despite what it meant for Missouri, I loved the call by Sam Pittman to go for 2. I thought that was the right thing to do at that time.
Yeah, on the road, I think it's what do they lose by losing that game? I mean, they're either going to be 3-7 at the end of the year. They're going to be 4-6. They're not throwing a parade either way. They're going to be pretty happy. I think you win over a lot more people than you lose fans and support in the locker room if you just kick it and try to keep playing a crazy game like that. It worked out for Missouri there, even though, my gosh, when that ball bounces off Jamal Brooks's hands, when he 3 things could have happened there. He either catches it, game over, knocks it down, game over, or he just lets it go up in the air instead of down to the ground, and he let it go up in the air. And Arkansas guy's right there to catch it. I mean, what are the odds of that happening? We saw it how many years ago in the other end zone when it went off a foot. I mean, it was crazy. I didn't think you could see something like that twice in one lifetime, let alone on the same field. And sure enough, we did.
Well, and the other thing that could happen there is, yeah, he tips the ball and it goes up in the air, but there just isn't an Arkansas guy streaking by full speed to catch it in stride. I mean, it's easy to blame Jamal Brooks there, but I don't know. I mean, even not making the play, it was a freak occurrence for Arkansas to make it pay off.
It also showed at the end of the game how important a kicker is. Oh, yeah. I mean, Harrison Mevis has been good all year, and we've been touching on him here and there, but he was really spectacular on Saturday, and they needed every single point and every single kick that he made.
To Baselak's credit, yeah, and to the receiver's credit, I mean, it ended up being a chip shot. 32 is easy for him. He can do that with his eyes closed. And it's been a long time since the Jeff Wolfert years where when they went out to kick a field goal, even with Grant Russell, who was pretty good, he wasn't Wolfert good, to where now you just take it for granted that he's going to make pretty much every one, especially PATs, unless there's a bad snap or a bad hold or something. The guy's just automatic, nerves of steel. You can throw out all those cliches, and they've got a guy like that. And they've got him. He's going to be a freshman again next year. So unless he goes to the NFL, they've got this kid for a long time.
Well, and like Dave pointed out, we forget things that happened earlier. The only reason that kick was in position to win the game is Arkansas missed 2 extra points. Right. I mean, a kicker, you really only pay attention to him when he does something like Mevis does, or he does something like the Arkansas guy did. And one of those is great and one not so great.
The other thing is, I didn't think he was missing. And again, to your point, Dave, it was 32 yards, but I didn't think he was missing. I was that confident. I was like, this is through. As long as they give him a shot, he's making this kick.
Right. And Pittman called timeout twice, which is what you do to ice him. And then after the game, to his credit, Mevis says, I like it when they do that because that gives me a little more time to focus and think about it. And Missouri's special teams coordinator, Eric Link, said after the second timeout, he came over to him and like, what more am I going to tell him? Just do the same thing I told you to do before. And he said he hit him in the chest and said, just go win the game. And that to have that kind of confidence in a true freshman when it was a redshirt freshman who made it possible by getting you down there, Missouri's in pretty good shape. Fans should be pretty happy that they got these guys for a while now.
And I actually know a guy who happened to be on the sidelines for that game. He was over on the Arkansas sideline, and he texted me the next morning and said he was about 10 feet from Pittman. And when Pittman called the second time out, he just turned around and goes, he's not missing this. I mean, Arkansas knew he wasn't missing it either, but you got to do everything you can.
Right.
Yeah. So the Tigers are now 5-3 on the year. They get ranked in the latest college football poll at number 25. They welcome Georgia this weekend in what could be a rainy, snowy, slushy game on Saturday at Faurot Field. But just the steps that this program has made from a 6-6 year, firing the coach, to now being ranked is, I mean, to use Gary Pinkel's term, it's pretty remarkable.
It really is. And to think that Missouri got a fighting chance in this game. Georgia's been the better team this year. The body of work is better. But you don't have to be better for 10 weeks to win this game. You just got to be better for 4 quarters unless it goes to overtime. And Missouri's got a chance here. I mean, everybody wants to break down, well, what's the incentive here? What's the motivation for each team? Georgia's season, their goals are done. They're not playing in Atlanta. They're not playing in the playoffs. This is the difference between like the Citrus Bowl and, I don't know, the Outback Bowl for them, or maybe one of those New Year's Six bowls. Missouri, it's not that much different either. They're going to go to an okay bowl or maybe a little bit better one, but Missouri just looks like a team that is playing for more than what it really is at this point. And that's why I think psychologically, motivation-wise, it maybe give them a little bit of an edge. And you still got to go out and make plays, and you can't give the ball up and, make some of the mistakes, get pushed around like they did, back at Tennessee, or turn the ball over like at Florida. But they got to have a shot in this one, you think?
Yeah, no doubt about it. Okay, we'll take a break. And by the way, I would imagine they would like to do that Tennessee game over a little bit later in the season. We'll take a break. When we come back, your tweets, and then we'll talk basketball. You're watching Tiger Sidelines on NC22. Welcome back to Tiger Sidelines, everybody. Dave Manner, Gabe DeArmond, and I'm Bo Bayman. Thanks, as always, for joining us. We're at Tiger Sidelines on Twitter. Our first tweet comes to us from Bob. He said, I'm not sure I felt as hopeless as I did last year after the 6-6 season. Could this team have the same record today if Barry Odom fired the offensive coordinator last year and had the offense? Or is it because they went with the coaching change that they got the wins over LSU and some of the other teams like Kentucky?
I mean, it's impossible to answer, obviously, but is there anybody here who thinks with Barry Odom on the sideline, Missouri wins the LSU game or the Arkansas game if they unfold the same way? Because I don't.
Yeah, no. I
agree.
agree.
Outside the game, the recruiting gains that this program has made, I mean, those are things outside of football games, and you win those games and it pays off with recruiting too. So yeah, and they're 2 plays away from being 3-5. Let's say that, but I think there are reasons why they're 5-3 instead, and a lot of it's coaching.
Yeah, no doubt. Steve wants to know, at 5 wins, is Mizzou going to a bowl provided they have them? It would be a big deal to get more practices in. The simple answer is yes. If they get wherever they get invited, they're going.
Wait, and nobody knows exactly how it's going to work because, I mean, bowls can take anybody they want except LSU, who, said we're not going to go to a bowl this year. Kind of like I said, I'm not going to win Powerball because I don't buy tickets. But I mean, I think most people at this point expect probably the Outback or the Gator, maybe the Citrus if they beat Georgia this weekend. But I think Missouri's playing in Florida on New Year's Day or somewhere shortly after.
Which would be nice. Jared wants to know thoughts on the quarterback room next year.
It's going to be a good situation. I mean, Tyler Macon he's signing on Wednesday. He's made that very clear that he's St. Louis quarterback. Connor Bazelak's not going anywhere. I mean, it's good to have numbers. I had people ask me all the time, kind of freaking out. What are they going to do with two guys? Well, two's better than zero, so
Right.
it'll work itself out. These things always do.
This is a good problem to have. 6 months ago, everybody was killing Barry Odom and saying he deserved to be fired because he couldn't bring in a quarterback for 3 years except one Band-Aid guy that turned out not to be as good. And now they're scared to death. What if this guy transfers? Well, look, they've already offered multiple 4-stars in 2022. Like, you sign a good one every year. And if Tyler Macon comes here and he wins the job and Bazelak wants to leave, so be it. And if Tyler Macon comes here and doesn't win the job and he wants to leave, so be it. That's fine.
There's a reason why kids leave. Kyle wants to know, if Mizzou wins on Saturday against Georgia, is it fair to consider this would be the best year by a first-year head coach at Mizzou?
Warren Powers went 8-4, beat number 1 or number 2 Nebraska. He opened up the year with the win over Alabama, and the Big 8 was pretty good back then. So not quite there.
I think,
close, but not quite there.
I think the best year one in Mizzou history is Gary Pinkel just sitting there knowing he had Brad Smith on the scout team and not telling anybody.
Yeah, good point. Next one and final one is, what is the ceiling for the men's basketball team? The men's basketball team 4-0 after a couple of wins this week. What is the ceiling for this team?
Top 4 in the SEC. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a reason. I don't think we can start talking about, hey, this team could go win it yet. Let's see them play an SEC game before we decide that. But I think the goals should be top 4 in the SEC and a seed where you're favored to win an NCAA tournament game. To me, the last week has convinced me. I now think I underestimated this team, and the NCAA tournament is the goal. And it's a realistic expectation. And if you don't get there, you probably underachieved.
I was wrong. Warren Powers beat Notre Dame, lost to Alabama, but nonetheless, still a great year. Yeah, I agree with Gabe on the basketball team. I mean, the SEC doesn't look very good as of right now. It's still way early. But this team, I think we're seeing nationally teams that are a little bit older and have some veterans, don't get rattled by all these schedule changes and all the things, the chaos that's going on off the court, look better right now. And Missouri falls in that category.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Okay, thanks for all your tweets. We'll take a break and we'll talk way more about basketball when we come back. You're watching Tiger Sidelines on MC22. Welcome back, everybody. Gabe DeArmond, Dave Matter, and I'm Bo Bayman. This is Tiger Sidelines on MC22. Thanks for watching in this middle of December. We got football still going on. We also have basketball, and the men's basketball team is now 4-0 after a win against Liberty, 69-60, a pretty impressive win. Maybe a little more impressive, the win on the road, a true road win at Wichita State last Sunday, where they won by 10, 72-62. But all things pointing up as number 6 Illinois comes in. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, Dave, your thoughts on the last 2 games, 10-point win and 9-point win.
Yeah, they're getting the job done against, quality teams. These aren't teams in the 300s RPI. I mean, Liberty won 30 games a year ago. They've already knocked off 2 SEC teams this year. Not a great matchup on the floor for Missouri. Konzo said that after the game. He said this was the game that scared him the most. Easier to say after you win, but I just thought that they showed some resilience. All of a sudden, they kind of flipped a switch. They were the better team, no doubt. And I think the most promising thing for this team so far is they're overcoming off nights from key guys. Drew Smith didn't play great against Oregon. Pinson did not play great against Wichita State, and then looked lost in the first. He looked like a freshman in the first half against Liberty. And it just other guys step in. Mark Smith's been really steady, and they can afford to have one guy, really struggle. And that's this team in the past hasn't really been able to overcome that.
I thought the biggest part of last night's win against Liberty was the little mini run at the end of the first half to get it back to 4. And then second of all, the hustle by Jeremiah Tillman when they were making the run and trying to extend the lead. I thought he played great and had some huge rebounds. And it was funny to hear Konzo say it was like surviving a math test yesterday.
Yeah, Tillman had a 3-minute stretch where he had 4 points, 4 rebounds, and an assist. And I told Dave after the game, or after that run, I said, 5 minutes ago, I didn't think I was writing about Jeremiah Tillman, but now I'm writing about Jeremiah Tillman. And he's still the barometer for this team. When he's good, their ceiling is very high. When he's bad, that ceiling is a lot lower. You're right. They went into halftime, and I thought Liberty should be up by like 12 points. Missouri only being down 4 can't feel good. And if you'd told me Liberty was shooting 7 of 28 from 3-point range, I'm assuming that Liberty got blown out of the building. Maybe it's a credit to them that they didn't. But Missouri really had that one under control for the last 5-6 minutes.
And it was interesting too in the first half. Wasn't it like the turnovers 9-0 or something?
Yeah.
Missouri had 9 turnovers. Liberty didn't have any.
9-0, and then 0 for 8 shooting 3. So like they were either throwing the ball in the stands or they were missing pretty good looks. I mean, they weren't taking bad threes. They were just missing them. And I thought, and Conzo brought this up after the game, kind of unprompted. Pinson was throwing the ball all over the place, and Drew Buggs comes in, doesn't do anything on the stat sheet at all, but he just settled things down. He has a pretty good floor game. He's not looking to shoot. He's not necessarily even getting assists. The offense is just looks a little more fluid when he's out there, and they all call him Coach Buggs. I think there's something to that. I mean, the guy just has this calm about him, and that's what this team didn't have last year. If Pinson's struggling, well, you go to the bench. Then who's your other lead guard? It's got to be Drew Smith, and Drew's playing 40 minutes, and he gets in foul trouble sometimes. So I think having that third ball handler is going to be critical for this team.
If you listen to Conzo talk, Drew Buggs isn't going to score a point this year, and Conzo's going to vote for him for SEC Player of the Year. I mean, he loves that guy like he's loved nobody that's been on this team in 4 years.
Yeah.
But it is interesting. Xavier Pinson was great against Oregon, and then he still has those moments when you're like shaking your head going, what in the world is he doing? Especially when he drives and just throws it nowhere.
He's, as a coach, and I think this is really hard for a guy like Conzo to do, but Pinson is a little Brett Favre-like, right? Like, you've got to put up with the crazy, oh my God, what are you doing interception? Because he's going to throw a pass nobody else can throw. Like, Pinson had a move last night where he went in and did this 360 spin between 2 defenders, dumped the ball over his head for a dunk to Tillman. It was a huge play in the game. And like, nobody else on Missouri's team makes that play. So to get that play, you also sometimes live with him driving 1-on-4 and throwing the ball off the bottom of the backboard. It just like at this point, I don't think you can change him. With the good, you're going to get some of the bad. Yeah,
no doubt about it. And now, fresh off a win at Duke, here comes Illinois in the bragging rights game. And this game, really has some zeal finally. Not that it doesn't when it's in St. Louis, but with barely any fans there this weekend, it's going to be, you have the football game in the morning, starts at 11. Then at night, you have this game. It's going to be a heck of a Saturday at Mizzou.
Yeah, it really could be. And I, for the first time ever, don't throw out the records for the bragging rights game because the records are really good. And this is a good matchup. Missouri's not ranked, but there will be if they win this game. Illinois is loaded. I mean, they took Duke to the woodshed the other night. Absolutely. They've got talent in that freshman class. They've got arguably the best player in the country. But Missouri gets up for this game. We know they always do. Jeremiah Tillman absolutely lied through his teeth after the game the other night when he said, yeah, I'm from Illinois, but this is just another game. No, it's not. It never has been. Because when they win it the last 2 years, guys like Pinson, who grew up an Illinois fan, Pickett and Tillman were committed there. Mark Smith played in this game for the other team. This means a ton to them, and they'll be up for it, I'm sure. It's just a matter of, this is one year where I think Illinois has more talent. We'll see, how Missouri balances that out with its experience and depth and defense and all those things.
It'll be interesting that it's not in St. Louis as well. I'm kind of curious, Gabe, to see what this game looks like when it's not half orange and blue and half black and gold.
Yeah, I really wish it was in St. Louis this year because, I mean, they're both good and they both haven't been good in a long time. And really, even though with it on campus, and I'm sure Jim Sturck is just sick about this, but I mean, this is the kind of day. First of all, it's the first time football and basketball have ever hosted top 10 teams on the same day. Now, that's not shocking because they don't even play on the same day a lot, but it's never happened before. But we've all been at days like game day against Oklahoma, 03 against Nebraska, some of those huge Big 12 games against Kansas. And it's just a feeling you can't replicate. And to have football hosting a top 10 team for possibly second in the East and Eli Drinkwitz's first year and like there's 10,000 people there, and then 20% of them, well, not even that many, the ones who are related to basketball players get to walk over to Mizzou Arena. It's going to be a good day, but it's not the same. I mean, what makes these games are the people there and the energy and the buzz, and you're just not going to get any of that. Even walking around campus, you're not going to get any of that.
Gabe, how was it to cover a game at Mizzou Arena and actually, not wear sweatpants?
Yeah, I've been to two. You don't know I didn't wear sweatpants. I mean, but no, it was fine. I mean, it's kind of pointless when you just sit there with a mask on in the media section and talk to dudes on a computer with an internet connection that may or may not work all the time. But whatever, I went.
Yeah, absolutely. We should mention the women's basketball team has not played yet. Their next scheduled game is Sunday against Missouri State at 2 p.m. We hope that they are finally able to get back on the court, as they are 1-0. And as we've been talking about, Saturday sets up to be a whale of a game. It's Missouri hosting Georgia in football at 11 o'clock. That game will be on the SEC network. May change. We'll see with other cancellations. And then it's Illinois and Missouri at night at Mizzou Arena. It should be a heck of a week, and we'll have a lot to talk about next week right here on Tiger Sidelines. So for now, behind the scenes, it's Brian and Matt. Want to thank Dave Matter of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and Par Mizzou's Gabe DeArmond. I'm merely Bo Bayman. We'll see you next week right here on the Sidelines.